Wait a minute. We'll run that back. Welcome, narrators. And this is the beauty of second episode of the Narrators Per Possession podcast. I'm Morris Bankston. I'm your host. And I had the mute button on. Mute button gets us everywhere in the world. But as we keep rolling and we keep being fun and creative, I'm your host, Morris Bankston. And today's narrative is we are talking about the NBA, the 2025 NBA Finals today. And I have a great guest today to talk us through that. He actually was on location in OKC for game one. Just to give you a bit of background. He is a co-host of the Athletics NBA Daily Show and also contributor to Raptors Republic. I am pleased to bring on none other than Es Baraheni. Welcome, S. Thank you.
What up? What up? What up? Yeah, the mute mic button has gotten the best of us, brother. I know exactly how it is. I've been there before myself. I know the vibes. Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, man. Really appreciate it. Very excited to talk hoops with you. We've kind of talked back and forth online a little bit, but it's good to finally meet you in person, I guess. This is as in person as it gets, but outside of actually meeting you in person, you know what I mean? But it's good to finally chat hoops, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And, refresh your memory because this popped in my head. I don't know if you remember this, but, I will quickly give a shout out to mutual friends of ours at the Center Hub. I remember we were both in this NBA trade deadline, this mock trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like probably my first in-person introduction, like at least like real-time introduction to you was the crazy you remember that 14 trade I was trying to pull off?
Yeah,
I think it was going to be like Bulls, Raptors, Lakers.
Yeah, you were trying to get Anthony Davis, right? Wasn't that the thing?
I was trying to get Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And I want Anthony Davis and Connect.
Right.
Which sound like an insane trade, but then all of a sudden, both dudes hit the trade block. So I think I'm the Windy meme is
right. You were ahead of your time, actually. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but completely thrilled to have you here, and I think it's great. I will plug again NBA Daily Show up front, right? And certainly, I'm sure there's other things you can plug in Raptors Republic. You're just a great follow on NBA Twitter, NBA social media, and really appreciate all the content you put out into the world. So to get us started, the first, again, today's narrative. We're in the middle of the NBA finals. We have Indiana Pacers taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the first two games, I think, have been like amazing basketball, to say the least. Where I want to start with is you covered the game. You covered game one on location for the Athletic. Just wanted to kind of get just your first-hand experience of the whole thing. I mean, obviously the game itself, but the whole journey going down there. I know you interacted with fans.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was my first time going down to Oklahoma, and experiencing Oklahoma City. It's incredible to see the amount of flags out there for OKC. One thing that always catches me off guard, especially as like a Canadian coming to America, is the amount of American flags that I see. But in OKC, it's like tons of OKC flags, right? Draped in blue, basically everywhere. And I thought that was really, really cool just to see how much they embrace the city. And the city embraces the team. The fans are rabid. They love them some OKC basketball. I was kind of saying this to you before we started, but I've been in a couple of very, very loud arenas. Toronto during that NBA Finals run was a very, very loud arena. I remember I was in Game 7 of Raptors versus Nets in 2014. And that arena was so loud that I'm pretty sure the rims were shaking. And I'm not even being kind of boisterous about this. I remember watching Darren Williams try to shoot a free throw and he missed. And you could see the rim shaking at how loud it was in 2014. Yeah. So I've been in some very, very loud arenas. And I can say for sure that OKC arena in game one was maybe the loudest I've ever seen it in my life. It's kind of a smaller arena, or at least that's what Thunder fans think. I thought it was a beautiful arena in the way that it was designed, how tightly knit everybody is, and how kind of crowded it feels. It kind of feels like the fans are over top the court in a way. So that's from a watching and viewing perspective. It was incredible to see that atmosphere. In terms of the games itself, like you said, it's been really, really good basketball through two games. The way that Indiana was able to steal game one and how they've been able to match up and I think play OKC more competitive than people expected, or at least maybe a casual perspective would have expected. I think a lot of people expected this to be OKC in 5 or 4. Or, I personally said OKC in 6. They're playing them tough. And I think part of that is the resiliency of this Pacers team that's made it all the way to the NBA Finals, a team that just doesn't die. And some of the brilliance of their coaching staff and Rick Carlisle just finding creative ways to limit OKC's effectiveness in certain ways and try to enhance what they can do. But we'll see. We'll see how they can bounce back in Game 3. I'm very curious to see how Indiana's going to answer in Indiana, which I expect to also be a very loud crowd.
Yes. Pacer fans, they are, they're loyal. They're devoted to the team, and certainly, you go through, 25 years of, finals appearances. I'm sure they've been waiting patiently. I thought in Game 1, the pace, and I wrote about this. We do a weekly newsletter for Nares per possession. I thought the rebounding really came through in that, to turn around that situation that the Pacers had in Game 1. It was the rebounding to me, and some of that. I also just peeking ahead to what I thought was effective from OKC's perspective in Game 2. Right, was I think you saw a clear rebounding sort of difference in Game 1. Right, the Pacers out rebounded Oklahoma City 56-39 total rebounds for the game. But then, OKC in Game 2, even though they stuck with their starting lineup, but Case and Walls saw a lot more of Hartenstein's featured in there. And just, the two big dynamic, I think that balanced the scales more for OKC being able to match up better with the Pacers.
Yeah, I do. And I think, the stat that kind of jumps out to me, and I have a video actually coming out hopefully either today or tomorrow on The Athletic, and that's about paint touches. OKC in the first game lost the paint touches battle, so Indiana actually got into the paint more often than OKC. And I think that was huge for Indiana to unlock their shooting, especially in that fourth quarter. They got Obi Toppin shots. Andrew Nembhard was getting downhill. They were creating shots for Aaron Nesmith, et cetera. That's what propelled that comeback. Game 2, it completely flipped. Indiana was not getting downhill as often, was not getting into the paint as often. OKC was the one that was initiating. You see the way that SGA can drive and kind of force defenses to collapse, and that created open shots for Alex Caruso and Aaron Wiggins. And so I think, this series is sort of reminding me how important it is for a basketball team to get paint touches. And, not to spoil it, but the Toronto Raptors struggle to get paint touches. And that's kind of my way of looking at the basketball world is sort of through the lens of this team that I cover and saying all right, what are they missing in what they should have, right? And getting paint touches, getting someone who can get into the paint at will is very, very important for a basketball team because it creates so much attention. You think of Giannis and what he can do at his best, right? He can get downhill consistently. You think of Zion Williamson when he's fully healthy, can get downhill, create open shots for Trey Murphy or CJ McCollum. That's just so important, but there's guards that do that extremely well. Obviously, SGA leads the entire league in drives per game, and so that's its own conundrum. And to your point about the size and the rebounding, I think that impacts it because OKC played a little bit bigger in the second game. They played the Chet and Hartenstein lineup a little bit more often. They didn't play it at all in Game 1. They ran Kenrich Williams for about 7 or 8 minutes. They only played him 1 minute in Game 1. Both Chet and Hartenstein played more minutes in Game 2 than they did in Game 1. So they played bigger. And I think that helped the rebounding battle. Even though they didn't change their starting lineup, they still rolled with that Case and Wallace starting lineup. I think that's perfectly fine to do. But in terms of their actual rotation, they played a little bit bigger. And I think that helped them kind of close the gaps in terms of the driving lanes for Indiana and also close out defensive possessions with rebounds.
Yeah. And this is more just a qualitative observation of it. I thought that, having Hartenstein on the floor more minutes with Chet, you saw it really energize Chet. I mean, he's much more aggressive, much more active in that first half, able to find his shot. And just he seemed like he was more comfortable knowing that he didn't have to shoulder all of the brunt of being the only big on the floor for OKC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the great thing about OKC is the versatility that they have. and how they're able to kind of give you different looks, right? The malleability of being able to switch 1 through 5, but also go double big or go very small. And I think Indiana can do some of that. I think Indiana is in a good position to steal another game here and make it interesting and go 2-2. And, after that, it's a best of 3 series, because of the fact that they can create quality looks for themselves offensively. And we saw that in the Denver series as well, where Denver was able to consistently get quality offensive possessions. Indiana didn't do it as much in game 2. I thought they struggled. I thought it was a lot of Tyrese figuring out how he can get downhill and struggling in that department. I believe I saw a stat, shout out to Samson who mentioned this to me, but Pascal Siakam only had 1 post up in game 2, and like that needs to change. He needs to be engaged more often in the post for them to create a mismatch. And then, obviously that creates a bit of a rotation problem for OKC's defense on the perimeter. And OKC concedes a lot of threes, right? So this is a perfect yin and yang situation where one team loves to shoot threes and is shooting them at an incredible clip right now with the Pacers. And one team that, because of the nature of their defense, typically likes to concede 3-point shots. And that sort of provides this opening for Indiana to kind of bounce back in this series in game 3. Especially, I don't know how much you believe in this, but like role players do shoot better at home. I feel like that's a thing that I've just come to terms with, is the fact that like guys like Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard and Obi Toppin, even though Obi had a really good game in game 1, they just shoot better on the road. And so they'll be more effective. Miles Turner, another guy who's probably going to end up shooting better at home. I think that makes sense for Indiana to try and bounce back in game 3. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that is an adage that seems, I think for me personally, I've seen it throughout all of the series leading up to the finals is, you see these incredible, these incredible moments from role players when they're at home. And it makes a lot of sense. You're at home, you know your spots in the floor.
Yeah.
You get to go through a routine that's more familiar with you. Basketball is a rhythm game. It's always been a rhythm game. So, to that extent, I don't think you definitely can't discount the impact of that variable of just like let the little role players get home, and especially Nembhard and Nesmith, they've been so instrumental throughout this entire Pacers run. And so I would look for that as well, is Nembhard, Nesmith, and Turner being able to find their shots. But I want to go back to that point that you made about Pascal Siakam. At least for me personally, I have found him to be a tremendous X factor that, if I'm being honest, last season when the trade was made, I didn't see the full vision yet, but that offseason of the Pacers really being able to gel around Siakam and him being able to find his stride in a lot of ways. I'd be curious for your take on this, because you know him well from the Raptors days, right? Yeah. I think there's a pronounced evolution in Siakam's game in this playoffs run that may still be underappreciated, in the sense that he's known for his post-up game, but I think what he's added to the Pacers transition is by just being able to like consistently run the floor and get steals and just be there at the rim. And to your point, be able to generate those paint touches that just allow so many options and opportunities to flow out of Indiana's offense. That's a big part of it too. Is just like Pascal, I think, just getting back into his rhythm.
Yeah, look, he has always been such an incredible transition player. I think, like, if you look back at the last 10 years or whatever, it's crazy. It's almost been 10 years for Pascal being in the league. He's probably one of the best transition scorers in the league over the last 10 seasons. And I say that because of his ability to get downhill and like play without the ball, but also his stride length and like his quickness just makes him like a menace with the ball now too. And so, yes, absolutely, that's a big part of the equation. You mentioned like the post steals and the early work that he does. Very, very important for OKC, especially against OKC, because you need to get up the floor as quick as possible to beat their defense. And so, yeah, Siakam is a huge X factor in this series, because I think OKC is built to mitigate what Tyrese Halliburton is good at. Especially because he's not able to drive and get downhill as often against this defense than he did maybe against New York or Cleveland or Milwaukee. And the onus is more on Pascal to kind of generate and keep them going offensively. I think a lot of the moments where Indiana's offense was at its most, potent was when Nembhard was dribbling the ball, when Nembhard was getting downhill, and you instead had Halliburton as more of an off-ball threat. Halliburton's such a great catch and shoot player, guy who can attack a closeout, that it's beneficial for them to have him off of the ball as a guy who can kind of weaponize his gravity that way, and have Nembhard as the ball handler who can kind of create offense for them and then look for Pascal in the post. So there's a couple different ways that I think the Pacers can approach this in game 2. It's like, all right, we need to, one, beat OKC's defense down the floor, get out and transition more often. They did such a great job of that against the Knicks, even off of makes, right? It was, we're getting buckets regardless. And the other thing is try to use Halliburton off the ball more often, and disguise some actions to get some easier looks for him, because you can't have him be, what was it before he entered that fourth quarter? I think it was like 2 of 5 or something like that. And then he ended up 6 of 11. You can't have that if you're trying to win a finals game,
Yeah, he very quiet in that second game, but yeah, once he got to the fourth quarter, then you start to see an uptick in his scoring. And one of the things I think about going back to that game, and even in these first 2 games, today's NBA is so pick and roll heavy, and at the same time, you don't really. This is my opinion. I don't see someone on the Pacers roster that really is like a solid, consistent screener for Halliburton, to where you could generate a lot of downhill, like just consistent easy downhill attacks. So I like your idea of like, if you can get Halliburton off the ball, at least to some degree, to where you're at least mixing up the looks that Oklahoma's defense has to react to, just to mix it up, and potentially just find spots for him where he can just get easier looks early. Because I know there's a lot of debate about, like, he can't be passive, and to a degree, like, some of that's him, but also I think you bring up great points, like, perhaps there's opportunity just to like get him in more diversified spots on the floor, to where he's able to hit shots early.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, just again, Indiana does a pretty good job of disguising actions. If you follow Caitlin Clark or anybody really, specifically Caitlin, to be honest with you, when it comes to breaking down. But like she does a great job of showing fans sort of different ways that the Pacers like to disguise their actions to create openings. They love that double drag screen for Halliburton, having one guy either slip or one guy kind of get downhill and roll to the basket. Doing more of that probably makes sense if they want to have Halliburton on the ball. But I think there's a way to weaponize Halliburton off the ball too. Even using him as a screener, use Pascal and have inverted pick and rolls and have Hallie popping out, weaponizing, again, his off the catch shooting to be able to, kind of just get some different looks going for them. And again, in Indiana, I do think it'll empower the role players to knock down their shots more frequently, because that's just the way it goes in these playoffs. And that's sort of like advantage Indiana as we head to Indiana,
Absolutely. Yeah, I love inverted pick and rolls. So I'm a Bulls fan, and so, just to like add to that context, right? Like I love when Alex Caruso screened while he's on Bulls. Right. He did some effective screening in game 2 as well. Yeah. Those are things where it's like, those out of the box things, they create those advantages, and they create those situations where it's just those little wrinkles that create this, seam of an advantage for an offense to exploit. And, I'm just visualizing, like, if we were able to see potentially like a Nembhard, Halliburton inverted pick and roll, like, imagine what kind of space that's going to create, either a downhill attack or a pick and pop.
Yeah, exactly. And I it's funny you brought up Caruso. I think Caruso, I'm sorry, by the way, I apologize. it's tough. It's hard, man. I understand from a Bulls perspective. You're like, damn, how did this happen this way? But like, it's very cool to watch him do what he does. I mean, and do it at his best. I remember writing an article at the start of the season, basically saying like, hey, a lot of people are talking about what Hartenstein and Caruso bring on the defensive end for this team, but like offensively, they're going to bring something to it as well. And the big part that I kind of mentioned in that article was the screening, because Hartenstein is such a great screener. I think he was like 2nd or 3rd in screen assists last season. Not sure what he ended up with this season with the Thunder. And Caruso is such a good like connector on offense. Again, just kind of doing a little bit of here and there. I was talking to Marcus Thompson about this yesterday, and I kind of compared Caruso to Andre Iguodala in the sense that he kind of completes the picture for the Thunder as a guy who's a willing shooter, but also just wildly versatile defender, can guard multiple positions, and he does a little bit of everything offensively. He's so willing to sacrifice for his own role to kind of complement whatever's happening for the team, that he's sort of this catalyst for everything that they want to do on both ends. And yeah, it's cool to watch Caruso shine again on this level. I'm sorry it's not with the Bulls. Yeah.
I mean, I have to be honest. I'm happy for him. The Bulls that's a whole different conversation. The Bulls are generations away from doing anything the AC is doing right now. I'm happy for him to be on the highest level of the NBA, playing like high level winning basketball. And he's evolved a lot. Just from those few seasons in Chicago. In game 2, he had quite 20 points that, like, I feel like people probably aren't paying attention enough. Like, his level of impact, everybody thinks about him as a lockdown defender, which he is, but you're hitting it on the head, right? Like, Caruso can impact offense quite well. And he has that IQ, lack of a better term, to know how to make the right plays to, finish off a possession, or just like do whatever's necessary to help the team win. I think that's the biggest thing about Caruso.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I'm very interested to see what happens in game 3. Very interested to see, because like this is I think this will be a 2-2 series once we head out of Indiana. That's my prediction here, but we'll see.
I'm starting to see it more. Actually, my original prediction about the series, like, I expected it to be a OKC in 5 sort of scenario, but then obviously, Pacers steal that first one.
It very well could be. Well could be. They could just rattle off the next 3 and it's over. But I feel like Indiana got one more in them.
Yeah. I'll say this too. Like, one of my more broad observations of this playoffs. I mean, everybody's talked about the physicality of the playoffs this season, and I think it's refreshing for me because I do tend to prefer a more physical style of basketball in general.
Yeah.
But the nuance within that increased physicality is the paint matters. We were just talking about paint touches. I would draw the contrast almost to American football, where, I mean, oftentimes football games are discussed in terms of you win the game in the trenches. I think the series, and I think all these playoff series have been a matter of, at some point, you have to win the game in the paint. Shooting is incredibly important. You have to get those looks. But at the same time, like, the paint is so crucial because either you get in the paint, you get a couple opportunities, right? You're either going to, draw a foul, you're going to score at the rim, or you're going to put a defense in rotation to where you get that good 3-point look.
Exactly.
And it's just like, I think
diversity.
The team,
at the end of the day, it's diversity, right? I remember people talking about how, like, the Celtics offense, it was just, let's just generate threes. Let's just generate threes. I think the thing that people kind of missed on there was that the way that they generated threes was by getting to the basket, drive and kick. That is exactly the way the Celtics like to play basketball. Did that provide for some monotonous basketball in the sense that it became a little formulaic? Yeah, you could argue that, but their process wasn't about let's hunt out threes. It was let's hunt out driving lanes so that we can create open threes for our shooters. And because we play 5 out, because we spread it out so, kind of open, it just generates all these good looks for us. And I think that's what both the Pacers and Thunder try to do for the most part, especially now that OKC is starting a little bit smaller with Chet at the 5, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even I feel like 5 out basketball, it gets knocked a lot, but there's some things to appreciate about it. I mean, one of the things I like about 5 out is, because you have 5 players, kind of lined up around in their spacing spots on that 3-point line, it does make for interesting variations of, like, when you see the side pick and rolls, how they, get the action going to get that angle to get into the lane. Like, those are, I mean, this is me just nerding out about basketball, but I think those are things that, like, should be celebrated about the game. It isn't just default, let's chuck up a bunch of threes. I think when it's done the wrong way, or like the suboptimal way, that's what you see. But you have to give the Celtics credit. I mean, they won a title by, like, maximizing the realm of possibilities with 5 out basketball and doing it in creative, interesting ways that I think adds to the game.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. We'll see what happens, man. I'm excited for game 3. That's for sure.
Same here. So I want to turn the page to another topic that you're deeply entrenched as a you cover the Raptors, you live in Canada. I want to dive into the Toronto Raptors offseason, and I have to say, like we said this before we went on, I'm just me personally as an outsider, I'm genuinely intrigued by where this roster is going, in your opinion. And I think the thing that kind of it piqued curiosity in my eye, at least, is I'll start with like the acquisition of Brandon Ingram, but feel free to just like dive and just share with the world, especially for people who are not familiar with Raptors basketball, at least this past season. Like, where do you see this roster heading? What are the things where this roster needs to like prioritize in terms of like levels of improvement? Just toss it. There.
Thoughts. Look, I could very. It's understandable that from like an outside perspective, this kind of looks like a confusing roster, because you look at the kind of wing trio of RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, and how that could all fit. The spacing isn't necessarily there. Scotty is coming off of a bit of a down season, especially as a shooter. And quickly hasn't necessarily acclimated as well. He had an injury riddled season as well. So we didn't get to see the full product, if you will, especially because we didn't see BI in a Raptors jersey at all after he was acquired, and was like, all right, so we're going to have to wait a full season to see how this team looks together. And they're getting expensive, and that is no question about. Like, they're a team that is pressing up against the luxury tax line, and they won 31 games last season, so they are in results mode as of today, as moving forward. They need to start winning games. And I think that's a bit of I think there's a bit of pressure, one, from ownership and from the front office and everything like that, to kind of see this proof of concept actually work moving forward. Like, are all of these pieces worth investing in? Because there's some extension questions moving forward with RJ Barrett. There's extension questions moving forward with Jakob Poeltl. There's extension questions moving forward with Ochai Agbaji. And if you do give all of those guys extensions, you're looking at being a team in the first apron.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, for you, in order to do that, you have to basically say this team is very, very good, has a chance to be, in the playoff mix. And, moving forward into next season, I think there's a pretty decent chance that happens, just because the East is pretty wide open. There's an opportunity there for one of these kind of middling teams to make a leap into playoff territory if BI is healthy. And if, Scotty Barnes can have a bit of a bounce back year. I actually think the pairing of Scotty and BI will allow Scotty to kind of play into the things that he's good at, which is being this off-ball guy, as a cutter, as a screener, obviously like a very good defender. Just allow him to kind of play and thrive in his role more than what he was forced to do this season for the Raptors, which is just go out and experiment. In their exit interviews, I kind of asked Scotty, I'm like, hey, like, what was the experimentation process like for you? And, he said, 1 month, I kind of decided I'm going to take a bunch of threes, and he did. Like, that tracks. In December, he took like 10 threes a game. And he's like, another month or a couple months, I was leaning in on the mid-range shot to focus on, kind of creating more from the mid-range area. And then, to finish out the year, I was trying to be aggressive, and all that tracked, honestly. If you look at his shot diet throughout the month, from month to month last season, it was a lot of experimentation. But in that experimentation, I think it became clear that he kind of needs a secondary creator, and that's where Brandon Ingram comes in. So I'm intrigued by the fit, but there's no question that this is a team that probably ends up making 1 or 2 trades this summer, just because of how expensive they're getting. And because I think they see that as an opportunity to maybe go out and make a big move. Obviously, they've been, kind of reported that they're interested in Giannis. Who isn't interested in Giannis? I imagine the Chicago Bulls are also interested in Giannis.
I'm sure,
yeah. I saw reports that they're interested in Kevin Durant. I think that would probably be more feasible in terms of trade package and whatnot. But we'll see. Those are obviously like really, really big fish to fry, and that requires a level of interest from them to get the deal done as well. But I do think the Raptors are in a position to make some sort of trade this summer just because of some of the duplication on the roster, some of the contract stuff that might be going on between RJ, between Yaka, between Ochai, and just generally like where they're at as a team. In terms of their approach, again, going back to like kind of being confusing, I'm sorry if I'm rambling a little bit, but like
No, it's perfect.
The Raptors front office has sort of always had this MO of like, let's, and shout out to Sam Vecini because he absolutely nailed this on his recent offseason overview of the Raptors, where it's like, let's turn this paperclip into a house type of thing. By kind of the product of like buying and selling and buying and selling and buying and selling until we get to a house. That is exactly their MO. And it actually has been their MO since Masai Ujiri became a Raptors general manager. If you think about it, you know, they'll draft a guy. You know, they drafted Terrence Ross. They turned Terrence Ross into Serge Ibaka. They drafted Jonas Valanciunas and drafted DeLon Wright. They turned those guys into Marc Gasol. They obviously drafted DeMar DeRozan. They drafted Jakob Poeltl, and those guys became Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, right? So it's the process of like getting these guys into their system and then finding ways to enhance their value and then trade them moving forward. And I think like that's sort of the way that they're approaching this team now too. I think RJ's value has it's improved since they've acquired him. I don't know if it's become positive value necessarily, but it's definitely improved from when he was in New York. I'm not sure what the league value or what people view of Emmanuel Quickly right now in the league, especially with that new contract, but there's obviously value for a guy like Jakob Poeltl because of how limited the center market is typically. And, you know, if you're making a really big splash, there's obviously value in a guy like Scotty Barnes. So that's the way that they like to operate. And now they have options, but too many options can also be a little bit confusing and can leave you, you know, kind of without a specific direction. So that's why this summer is so fascinating. It's like, which way is this roster going to go? Are you just going to roll with what you have right now, or are you going to go out and make that big splash, you know?
Yeah, and just to add context, I mean, I think the contract point that you brought up is that certainly is it's not nothing. It is an imperative, right? Because just looking at Spot Rack right now, going into the 25-26 season, Raptors are $6 million under the luxury tax, and you know, $7 million away from first apron. So it seems like there's an advantage to at least putting some more flexibility into the cap sheet, and yeah, I guess it sounds like it's a balancing scales approach where they obviously have to thread the needle financially, but you know, if you're taking this house flipping approach, you know, you sort of have to be patient with the, you know, hoping that the value continues to appreciate to where you can, you know, enter a trade market and try to reap benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like it seems like there's going to be a lot of activity this summer, you know, even outside of the Giannis and KDs of the world. Very curious to see what happens with Trae Young. We'll see if LaMelo Ball becomes available. Any of the Kings players, although I wouldn't be as interested on Domantas Sabonis. But like, you know, if Malik Monk becomes available, we'll see. Like, I think generally there are going to be opportunities here for the Raptors to kind of take advantage of. It just depends how aggressive they want to be and how they want to utilize their players and what do they envision for themselves long-term, because I'm not sure, as much as I've really enjoyed covering and watching RJ Barrett over the last, you know, season and a half. I don't know if he is a part of the long-term future of this team as the sort of trio of Scotty, BI, and RJ. It kind of, it's not the cleanest fit on court just because of the lack of shooting there. So I don't know. That's sort of where I'm at right now. It's are they going to make some sort of trade over the next couple months to capitalize on some of these bigger salaries that they have? And what does that trade look like? Yeah.
And you know, that's a good segue into so there's a column that you published on Raptors Republic. I certainly found it interesting because it also includes current Bulls guard Kobe White. So you know, kind of wrote out a proposal for the Bulls would trade, or Raptors would trade for Chicago Bulls guard Kobe White and Bulls wing Patrick Williams in exchange for RJ Barrett and the number 39 2025 first round pick.
Yeah.
And a future second round pick.
Right. Yeah.
So I know just from observation, like that, on the Bulls side, speaking on behalf of Bulls fans, there's probably mixed emotions about that or mixed feelings on that. I can appreciate the nature of what that proposal represents, because if I take my fandom out of it, there probably is some answers that the Bulls themselves need to make about both Kobe White and Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams for less desirable reasons.
Yeah.
He's in his new contract. The production really hasn't shown up at all for his entire tenure, unfortunately. Some of that in his control, some of it not. And then Kobe White's scenario, he's coming up on he's extension eligible, but because of the value of his current deal, the Bulls really don't have a feasible path to actually extending him. He's likely going to go to unrestricted free agency. So I thought that was interesting that you put that, you put this proposal together. I would love to just hear like more of like, what do you see in the realm of possibilities? Like, why would the Raptors do this? What does this benefit on the Raptors side? What is it that you like about Kobe White and Patrick Williams in this deal?
Well, I first of all, I love Kobe White as a player. You would know this from watching the Bulls a lot. I just think he has like the potential to become an all-star in the right environment. The way that he is grown as a playmaker and pick and roll playmaker and decision maker, kind of runs the offense for the Bulls, has been really, really entertaining to watch. Big time shot maker, can create his own shot. And I think that's very, very lacking on this Raptors team. Immanuel Quickley isn't that. I think Immanuel Quickley is more of an off-ball guard who is growing as an on-ball player, but is not where Kobe White is at in terms of the self-creation department. And I think that's where they can thrive together. Now, I kind of wrote in that article too that I can see a version of this where they swap Quickley for Kobe White. And basically, like, instead of you guys paying Kobe White, you guys keep Immanuel Quickley as sort of a $32.5 million player. If you don't want to pay Kobe White, probably something around 36, I'd say 37, maybe something like that, depending on what the contract looks like. And from the Raptors' perspective, it's a swing and a bet on a guy who maybe has some all-star potential, who's, I believe, 26, I want to say, something along the lines of that.
25, 26.
Yeah, so it kind of fits into the timeline of what you're looking at. Like, you don't get any older by trading for him. And then the Patrick Williams situation is just a value play in the sense that you're taking on a contract that is a negative at this point, and you're kind of doing the Bulls a favor in that regard. At the same time, you're also saying like, hey, maybe we can turn Patrick Williams into something else, like down the road, or we can develop him and kind of squeeze that juice out of him, that maybe that potential we haven't seen in Chicago. And from the Bulls' perspective, like, you get a little bit more roster balance, because the Kobe White, Josh Giddey backcourt might not work as well defensively. You get RJ Barrett, who obviously has more positional size, who can also handle the ball, who can be a secondary creator for you, who can kind of allow Matas Buzelis to stretch his wings more often. And so that's where I see it. And it's also kind of like a value play from you guys. You have 2 years of RJ to see how much more he can develop. And I believe he's 24 years old. So still a little bit of room for him to develop and become a better player too. That's the way that I envisioned it. It's like, you bet on Kobe, you bet on RJ, and the Bulls aren't necessarily in a situation where they can get tons of surplus value for a guy like Kobe White because he's headed into unrestricted free agency. So it makes it a little bit tougher to get, dollar for dollar value, if you will. So it's an opportunity for the Raptors. And maybe this could be a unique situation for the Bulls to get something back in return.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm the Bulls front office and you call me up with that deal, me personally, I have to seriously consider it, because I think for the things that you just mentioned, Kobe White and RJ Barrett, I mean, they're the same draft class. So right there, you can at least not be concerned like, oh, are we going to, age ourselves? Arturas Karnisovas, the head of the Bulls basketball operations, that's been his mantra all season, talking about, oh, we want to be younger and run faster and all that stuff. So that fits into his wheelhouse. I think, having RJ Barrett, I personally I'm not high on the defensive fit for sure of Kobe and Giddey, unfortunately. So I would like to at least see a different look. And I think it's, the reporting from, the local Bulls media, it seems pretty clear that franchise is heading for extending Giddey, potentially giving him perhaps more than what the market is going to give him. So if you're going to go all in on Josh Giddey, my point of view is like you pretty much have to now start building a roster for Josh Giddey. You can't just kind of like keep running it back with what you have. Like you need to be more intentional about this roster. So I like it in that sense.
I'm also curious if like the picks can be put into conversation here, you know, because you guys have 12, right? 12 is the
pick. We're number 12.
Yeah, so something like maybe there's a world in which it's like a 9 for 12 swap type of thing, where you guys can move up a couple spots and the Raptors move back a couple spots, and maybe that's something else that can be entertained. That's just something that kind of keep thinking about, because I do think the Raptors, there is a world in which they would be open to trading back. And obviously that would require a couple different things from whoever they're trading with, but wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. And it just feels like there's a lot of opportunities in this draft for some movement, especially in that like late lottery type of thing between OKC and Atlanta and you guys, and even Portland or Houston. It just feels like there's kind of prime for some movement to happen.
Well, I know just specifically from a Bulls reporting standpoint, Yegor Denham is the name that continues to be
I saw that
to the Bulls. So I guess if you strong arm the Bulls and say, hey, we're going to take Yegor, would you like the 9th pick? I think that's the path to it. Like if you want to trade back, that's what you say.
Oh, Arturas Carlos, man. AK, what a guy. Oh, Yegor Demon, Josh Giddey, and Matas Buzelis. What a trio. And Nikola Vucevic, I forgot. That's just
One thing about AK, he has a type. You know, that much I can say is bullshit. He has a type. You have the optics of you can be toolsy and run fast,
do stuff.
You check his box, good.
Yeah, that's funny. That is really funny. Oh man, what a time! Look, we were actually talking about this on the podcast yesterday, and we were all just kind of in agreement that like we wish the Bulls could just be back to like relevancy. It would be cool for them to be back to relevancy and to be fun. I really enjoyed watching the Bulls this season. Actually, honestly, the fast paced, high octane offense, that was a lot of fun. The way that they got up threes and got up and down the floor, that was a lot of fun to watch. Hopefully they can kind of like lean in on that as a philosophy, like an identity. And I think with a player like Josh Giddey, if you're committing to him long-term, kind of makes sense to do that. But now it's just, like you said, building the pieces around him that kind of makes sense to that. By the way, RJ Barrett, near the top of the league in transition points, just mentioning, just want to put that out there because he is a good transition player, right? That feeds into the identity of how the Bulls want to play too.
Yeah, and you know, the transition game has been a huge point of emphasis with, you know, the AK, since AK took over the Bulls basketball operation department and he brought in Billy Donovan. Transition has always been sort of a hallmark of this iteration of the Bulls. Even when the Bulls had, you know, the 35 games with Lonzo Ball where they're on top of the East.
The Caruso, Lonzo, they were running too. Yeah,
there's a lot of transition scoring. So I mean, to that extent, I'm glad you bring up that point because again, like there are definitely Bulls fans I know from what I saw when they saw your comment like hard pass or no.
Yeah, of course. Hey, look, there were Raptors fans that were like, no way, Pat Williams, we're not taking on that contract. So I know exactly. You know, someone kind of messaged me on the side and they're like, that was a trade that got both fan bases equally mad. So, you know, it's a good trade. And it's like, all right, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, you know, you shed additional light on, like, from the Raptors standpoint, why Pat Williams would make sense in the Raptors organization. You've just sold another point on me. Raptors having a front office philosophy, again, basically being house flippers. Patrick Williams is a great candidate for that right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he absolutely needs to change the scenery to just give him an opportunity just to see something different and just like function differently. These first 5 years for him in the Bulls organization, it's been a lot of unfortunate false starts and mishaps and just, you know, not great situations for him. He's drafted the top 4 picks, so this is just the optics of that. But then, you know, the front office, they go and do all these massive moves, bring in Lonzo.
He's a Florida State guy, right?
Yeah.
Scotty Barnes is a Florida State guy.
There you go. And it's like,
They do like that. I know in the second round, they're looking at a couple of different Florida State guys right now too. So they do definitely like themselves some FSU dudes. So yeah.
Copy that Knicks playbook. Yeah, get the whole college program there. And then you go to Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how you do it. Yeah. No, we'll see, man. Look, I'm very fascinated because we could go back and forth on the Raptors and Bulls basically for hours and talk about how both teams who are in the middle of the Eastern Conference at this point are kind of primed to do stuff. What that stuff is we'll see, because ultimately I think the Bulls, a lot of fans, I assume, are kind of wanting a reset, a retool, a rebuild to kind of restart this whole thing. And I think that definitely makes sense from their perspective, while the Raptors are trying to get back into playoff contention. We'll see how that looks. Very fascinated to see how the next couple months will shake out. That's for sure.
I agree. I would say this, like, you would be surprised. This season, it was sort of like a low-key civil war within the Bulls fan base, where like it was just tanking civil war for the whole season. People were like hard, like
I'm used to that, man. Yeah,
tank. And then there's others like, oh, we got this triple double machine, Josh Giddey. We're good. Like, we're gonna be top 16.
You know that meme where the guy is almost being hanged and he's like, first time. That's how I feel when it comes to tanking versus not tanking conversations for the Raptors. That's basically been the conversation for the last 2 or 3 seasons now, basically since the Wemby draft, where every single year we're just like, there's a basic civil war going on between fans that are saying they should tank, they should lose every game possible, and they should not tank. And, this is a team that's got to learn how to win, et cetera, et cetera. And we sort of saw the byproduct of that in this lottery, right? Where it's like the Mavericks made it to the play-in, were 1 win away from the playoffs and ended up with Cooper Flag. And then the Utah Jazz are picking 5th and the Washington Wizards are picking 6th. That's the way the cookie crumbles,
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, because the flattened odds is not as straightforward as a proposition as it was even last year. I mean, the Hawks, walked into the top pick, and the Hawks played the Bulls and play-in. So exactly. It's like the front office dynamics, the things that inform these decisions, they continue to evolve, and they at least make for interesting conversations. That much I'll say.
For sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's it on the Raptors front. I'm very curious to see what they'll do over the next couple months, especially the draft in a couple weeks. That'll be interesting. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Cool. Yeah. So I want to wrap up with something that I think is cool, and I think all the NBA fans out there, everybody on NBA Twitter, like, I want to just celebrate and highlight something that, like, I think you add is like really cool in all the visual essays, the video essays that you do. And like, they've been cool. Like, you've done them throughout the playoffs, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, because like I would assume like this isn't like something you just, or let's talk. Yeah, let me ask it in this way: like, the origin story of your visual essays, was this something that like you started with these playoffs, or how long have you been doing the essays?
Man, I've been doing video essays for like 6-7 years now.
Okay.
I used to do them a lot in school. So I went to sports media school, and we would have this like hour-long show that we would have to produce. And I loved video editing. I love doing voiceovers. I love kind of cooking up like these montages. I remember watching like NBA TV when I was a kid, and Ahmad Rashad and all those type of things. And like, they had those visual storytelling type of videos, 2-3 minute stories that they would tell about the league and what they saw, and kind of connecting it to something bigger, right? And I love that aspect of basketball. To me, basketball is about storytelling. And that is something that it kind of like intrinsically, it kind of piqued my interest when I was in school. Started doing them for fun. And it's sort of what got me to work at The Score, because they obviously, I don't know if you check out The Score on YouTube or anything like that, but they lean in on video essays heavy. They're Very, very insightful, very good video essays. And I got a chance to be a part of that team for 2 years. And so I learned what it meant from like a production perspective to enhance what you do, from a storytelling, from a writing perspective. And now I get to do it for The Athletic. I get to do it for myself. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do. I get to do it for Bleacher Report. That is one of I love visual storytelling. Both of my brothers are film directors. And so we were always talking about like visual storytelling and how you can tell stories through images. And that's basically why I like doing this version of storytelling. It kind of appeals to me the most, but yeah, appreciate you, man. Thank you for shouting this out, by the way.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun to do.
Yeah. And so I have your Kawhi story. I'll share that briefly. And like, honestly, it just reminded me of how cool Kawhi was in this playoff run. I mean, this is like the whole reason why this, I call this narratives per possession because I think, basketball stories matter. And like, to me, storytelling is an incredibly important part of the game of basketball. And even going back to like the 90s NBA on NBC days, like every single game started with like those vignettes of Marv Albert, like just really setting these like amazing, like energetic sort of tones for the game that just got you so drawn into what you saw. And like I could ramble on for that for minutes more, but yeah, let me bring up your story because these are things that like basketball I would argue needs because it gives us so much to sort of be drawn into. So bring that up.
Grateful for what you have because you don't know when it'll be gone. And Kawhi Leonard knows that feeling all too well. We as basketball fans know it by watching him throughout his career. I mean, 2019 feels like it was just yesterday. And yet it also feels like it was eons ago. And ever since, we've had some incredible Kawhi performances, no doubt, but it always ends up becoming this big what if. Wildly enough, his career has been defined by these moments, sometimes even more than the spectacle that he is as a player. The dominance, the surgical precision he shows as a scorer, no wasted movements. Tonight was just a reminder of how much of a playoff riser the Claw can be. A testament to how resilient of an athlete you have to be to go through multiple lower body injuries and just keep getting back up and doing it all over again. I'm not sure what the future holds for Kawhi or the Clippers, honestly. I don't know if they'll be able to win this absolutely daunting, incredible playoff series. I don't know how many more healthy games of Kawhi we get, but what I do know is that I won't take games like this for granted. Cherish this one. He deserves that much. Man, I completely forgot. I honestly forgot I did this one. Oh, that's funny. I'm watching. I'm like, oh wow, this actually turned out better than I thought. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, for everybody's benefit, I mean, describe your creative process for like pulling that together because that's an amazing video. And
appreciate you, man.
The production details are rich. They're in depth. Like the music. The shots, it's actually it's informative now. As you say, you have that background and you have your family is in filmmaking because it comes through.
Yeah, to me, it is all about like the emotion you feel in that moment. And so first and foremost, above anything else, above like breaking down plays or like talking about analysis or anything like that, like to me, I love the emotion that basketball invokes in me. You know what I mean? And so when you watch Kawhi do what he did in, I think it was game 2 against the Nuggets, and you're like, man, like I loved watching him do that consistently. And obviously me being a guy who covered the Raptors in 2019 and saw that full length, it's like it kind of made me battle through what he's been through the last 6 seasons as a player, right? And so you kind of go through the emotional process of like unpackaging that in your mind. And you're like, what does that bleed out onto the page? What are you trying to do in terms of like the creative process? And so I write something, I'll find a music that kind of sets the tone for what I'm looking for, match it to that. And then creatively, I sort of know as I'm writing, it's like, all right, this is sort of the visual aspect. This is how I want it to be paced out. This is how I want it to look. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it. But it's as lame as this might feel, it's sort of just going based off of feeling, it's just going based off like an intuition to be like, all right, this is sort of how I want it to look and how I want it to feel and how the emotion that I want it to invoke in you as a guy who watches this. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, that's the best reaction that I could get is someone that actually appreciates it,
I would say there's nothing lame about that. And to a degree, like that, again, I think that's what is incredibly important about having good storytelling in our basketball content and in basketball conversations, because basketball isn't rock'em sock'em robots. These are human beings competing for things that matter to them. And it's like you miss so much of the game if you don't have a way to sort of connect into that and help fans connect to that. It's and I imagine, like, this is just me hypothesizing and empathizing for a bit. Like, you get into there's so many of these intergenerational debates about NBA basketball constantly. And, oh, the 90s are better or the 80s are better, blah, blah, blah. The nostalgia effect. I think fundamentally people who watch NBA basketball, they want to be connected to the game. They want to feel the game.
Yeah.
So,
like you are able to understand what it takes a player like Alex Caruso to do what he does right now in the NBA Finals more when you know his story and when like he came from an undrafted guy to a guy who like earned his way onto the Lakers as a two-way guy, earned his way into a rotation spot, became one of the favorite players LeBron played with, obviously helped them to that championship run, and then they didn't pay him. They undervalued him again, and he went to the Bulls. They obviously had a really, really fun like nucleus, but that kind of obviously, as we've talked about, wasted away. And now he has that opportunity with another team to take everything that he's learned in that process and put it into this team that actually has a chance of winning a championship. Like that to me is the story of this guy, it's not of the finals. There are many, many more other stories out there, but that's just one aspect. Like, to me, that's cool. That part of it is like all worth the journey of watching these guys become who they are. And that's why, honestly, man, that's why I like watching for improvement from players and like growth from players. That's definitely the number one thing that I look for when I watch basketball. It's like how this guy is getting better at this certain thing. That's why it's been a joy to watch RJ over the last year and a half, because he actually did get better in certain areas. Compared to watching him in New York. And like, that's, to me, I don't know, that invokes an emotion, that invokes a feeling. You get that feeling of what basketball is really about, right?
100%. And I mean, so this will touch back to the column you wrote on like, oh, Raptors should trade RJ Barrett for Kobe White and Patrick Williams. Less on the Patrick Williams front, but Kobe White. And I would hypothesize that a lot of Bulls fans, if they're negative on your column, the reason why is because there's definitely a deep fan base attached.
Sentimental value to Kobe, absolutely.
Because his story, his journey. There's times where like Kobe White was perceived as an unplayable Bulls player, and it wouldn't have shocked anybody if Kobe White were on the trade block. Not last season when he had that, like, to me, he should have been the most improved player.
Yeah, I agree.
But the season before, I think a lot of Bulls fans went into that season, that 23-24 season. I'm sorry, the 22-23 season, expecting Kobe White to be traded, but then he just he started putting those pieces together for the things that you saw improvements in, like actually being able to be a reliable pick and roll ball handler in his career, figuring that out, being able to attack downhill, being able to, he's never going to be a defensive player, and I would be the first to say it, but like he gives defensive effort and help position, and he'll rotate, he'll defend the rim if he has to. Like, he puts in so much effort. But that's a great example too of like the story of Kobe White. That's something I went into a story campaign of Kobe White. I had this hashtag campaign called "Cut That Check for Kobe" to really like advocate that he needs to be extended by the Bulls. Free agency.
Honestly, man, like he probably should be extended by the Bulls. Like I think that another priority here for like the Bulls perspective is like retaining the players you have. You can't just let them walk for nothing. Like that would be crazy because that, Caruso, obviously you got Giddey, but for the most part, like for Levine and, everybody's going to talk about the value that they receive back for these players, but you just can't let Kobe White walk for nothing. That's a success story for your franchise, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun. And like, I wholeheartedly agree with you, man. Like that sentimental value is a real thing. Even watching Pascal Siakam right now in the NBA finals, that was something that kind of evoked emotion for me to be like, man, I've watched this guy since he was unplayable, as a rookie. And like, he was basically just a run and jump dude. And now he's, hunting out mismatches, cooking in isolation, post score, all that type of stuff that we talked about earlier. That's become the catalyst, like the X factor in an NBA finals. It's very, very cool to see him through that entire journey that he's had. So yeah, it's all about that, man. Like if we're watching sports, to me, that's the reason we're watching it. You know what I mean? To me, this is the whole point of it, is to somehow feel an emotional connection to what we're watching. Otherwise, what is the point of any of this? You know what I mean? But
absolutely. And I think this is a good question just to tie all together. I mean, from your point of view, what makes a great story?
Damn. Probably one that evokes emotion or makes you think about something. Yeah, I think that's the one way that I would put it. It's something that makes you think, makes you consider. I think one of the things, if I ever have kids, or if I'm blessed to ever have kids, like it's to become as well traveled as possible so that they can experience and understand where other people come from. I think when I was a kid, my parents allowed me to do that often, and kind of take me to different places and meet different people, whatever. And that allows you it affords you the luxury of being able to understand where other people can come from and their experiences. And if a story can do that, then it's done its job, to make you consider where someone else is coming from. But yeah.
That's solid. Yeah. I have kids, so I appreciate hearing that from you too.
Yes,
completely agree. Well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate just being able to have this space, this moment to talk with you. Please plug where people can find you and what you have working on, what you're working on, anything coming up.
I like I said, I've got that video on kind of in-game adjustments and paint touches coming out for The Athletic either today or tomorrow. You'll probably get a video essay out of me at some point if the Thunder or Pacers win this NBA Finals. Probably one of those emotional ones that, that's the way that I'm going to lean with this one. But otherwise, tap into the Athletic NBA Daily. We do a daily podcast. It's in the name, with myself, Dave Dufour, and Zena Cada. Also Andrew Schlecht and Alex Spears, who do the Saturday Slam and Jam. But yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you. It's great to finally talk hoops with you. And hopefully we can do this again, man.
Yeah, love to have you back anytime, especially, anything Raptors pops up, definitely would have you on for that. But, just thinking out loud, when the Raptors and Bulls play, they're always like these rock fights.
Oh my God. I hate when the Raptors and Bulls play. I hate it. It's like, I'm remembering, was that this season? Was it last season where the crazy Alex no, it was last season. It was last season because Caruso is on Thunder. But you remember the game where the Bulls came back, Caruso hit the corner three, and it was just this absolute collapse by the Raptors that led to a game winner. And you're right. It's always a rock fight. It's always a weird game. It's always the strangest basketball game you've ever watched. I'm thinking of the playing game, obviously, with DR DeRozan there yelling and screaming at the free throw line.
Yeah, it's the closest thing the Bulls have had. Honestly, you guys are the closest thing. I would argue Raptors are the closest thing the Bulls have had to a rival in probably 15 years. Like, because they just, unfortunately, the Bulls haven't played.
I guess so. I'm thinking like maybe, probably like the Celtics or the Cavs, when it was D Rose.
That for sure.
That's probably the last time that I think was like a legitimate rivalry,
But I would say like post Jimmy Butler trades, it's been the closest thing because no other game has had like all this crazy stuff constantly. Or like, it's not necessarily fisticuffs or anything, but it's just like every single game is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. We are bound to play in the 7-8 matchup again next season, my guy. We are destined to do that. That's probably what ends up happening.
It's already in my calendar for sure. But yeah, no, would love to have you back. Thank you again. And
Yes,
I'll
sir.
just say, just to plug, obviously, I'm on X. Nearest Per Possession is on X. Please join our Patreon community as well, where we have video content, we have written content. There's a weekly newsletter out right now. Appreciate everybody watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment on this video because we're trying to grow an awesome basketball community where we can have these kind of great basketball conversations. So,
sir,
S, once again, thank you. Greatly appreciate you blessing us with your presence. And narrators, until next time, we'll talk to you soon.